This is
It was a quiet
outrageous. A
afternoon when a
$5,000
thick
fine for
envelope
what?
I
appeared
don't
at
know,
my
but we need to
doorstep.
fix this now.
They're towing our car
Curiosity quickly
next.
turned to panic as I opened it. My eyes froze on the words, $5,000 in HOA fines. I had followed every rule. My lawn was immaculate, mailbox freshly painted, driveway spotless. How could they justify this? The letter was formal, stamped with the HOA emblem, threatening late fees, legal action, and even a lien on my property if payment wasn't made immediately. My mind raced. Could they really take such drastic measures over a minor violation? I replayed every interaction with the HOA, searching for a mistake. There was none. Absolutely nothing. Paying wasn't an option. Ignoring it seemed risky. Then a spark of determination hit me. I would uncover the truth. I refused to be intimidated. I had to know how they justified such an outrageous fine. I called the HOA office. A polite, evasive voice assured me they were simply enforcing rules. But specifics were avoided. Something felt off. My instincts told me there was a hidden story behind this $5,000 fine, and I intended to uncover it. That night, I reviewed the letter repeatedly. Dates, signatures, rule references all noted. Each line deepened my suspicion. This was more than enforcement, it was intimidation. I decided to investigate every record, meeting note, and board vote to find proof. Then I realized, the discovery I was about to make would completely turn the tables. The organization threatening me with thousands would soon face the consequences of its own mistakes. Fear shifted to resolve. Knowledge and preparation were about to become my greatest weapons. I couldn't sleep. Thoughts raced, strategies formed. One thing was certain, the $5,000 fine would not stand. It was more than money, it was a test of courage, persistence, and truth. I began drafting my plan, gather records, document irregularities, and uncover the hidden procedural loophole that would change everything. Little did I know, this fight would escalate, involve neighbors, and ultimately expose the HOA's mismanagement completely. The next morning, armed with determination, I drove to the HOA office. My goal was clear: uncover the truth behind the $5,000 fine. I brought a notebook, pen, and a checklist of every question I needed answered. The receptionist greeted me politely, but her eyes betrayed unease. I wasn't just another complainant, I was someone who intended to dig deeper than anyone before. I requested all meeting minutes, voting records, and correspondence related to fines issued over the past 5 years. The clerk hesitated, then handed over piles of documents, some neat, others barely legible. As I flipped through them, patterns emerged: dates didn't match, signatures were missing, and references to rules were vague or non-existent. At first, I couldn't believe it. Could such a formal organization operate with such chaos? My hands shook as I realized the implications. Many fines, including mine, had been issued without proper approval. It wasn't just me, neighbors' fines showed the same irregularities, a disturbing pattern of negligence and intimidation. I started noting anomalies, creating a timeline of fines, missing approvals, and confusing rule citations. Each detail added fuel to my growing sense of vindication. Then, buried in a stack of obscure documents, I found it, a board resolution from 3 years ago stating all future fines required a majority vote from current board members. Reading it repeatedly, my heart raced. This single resolution exposed a glaring truth: the fines against me and others had no legal foundation. Every threat, late fee, and notice hinged on authority they didn't have. Suddenly, the power dynamic shifted. Fear could no longer control me, knowledge was my ally. I made copies of every irregular fine, missing signature, and the pivotal resolution. These documents weren't just evidence, they were weapons to hold the HOA accountable. The more I analyzed, the more confident I became: one homeowner, armed with facts, could challenge a powerful organization. By the end of the day, a plan began to form. The fines, once terrifying, were now the key to transforming intimidation into accountability. I knew my next steps would require strategy, precision, and courage. What had started as a personal battle was evolving into a neighborhood-wide reckoning. With the evidence in hand, I returned home, heart pounding with a mix of fear and determination. I spread the documents across my dining table: fines, voting records, meeting minutes, and the pivotal board resolution. For the first time, the $5,000 fine that had terrified me no longer seemed like a threat, it felt like leverage. I wasn't just defending myself anymore, I was preparing to hold the HOA accountable. I meticulously organized every document. Each fine I had received was paired with proof of missing approvals, contradictory rules, or lack of majority votes. Notes in the margins highlighted discrepancies, dates that didn't align, and blank signature lines. My strategy was clear: present undeniable evidence in a logical, organized manner. Confusion had been the HOA's greatest weapon, and clarity would become mine. Next, I consulted a local attorney familiar with HOA law. I laid out every detail: the fines, missing approvals, and key resolution. She confirmed my suspicion: the fines were legally invalid, and I had every right to challenge them. Her guidance was invaluable: document everything, communicate formally, and present evidence in a way the board could not ignore. My anxiety began to transform into determination. While reviewing the documents again, a pattern became clear: almost every homeowner who had questioned a fine experienced similar intimidation. This wasn't just my battle, it was systemic. My goal expanded beyond defending myself: I wanted to expose the HOA's mismanagement and protect the entire neighborhood from future abuses. I drafted a formal letter to the HOA, referencing every fine, the missing approvals, and attaching copies of supporting documents. The tone was firm but professional, emphasizing legal obligations and procedural errors. I knew this letter would rattle them. It demanded acknowledgement and action. That evening, I envisioned the board's reaction. The same people who had once threatened me were now about to face clear, documented proof of their own failures. Excitement and nervousness mingled in my chest. For the first time, the fight felt winnable. I realized this confrontation was about more than money. It was about justice, fairness, and proving that one prepared homeowner could challenge an entire board. The next morning, I would deliver the letter, setting in motion a series of events that would completely change the neighborhood's power dynamics. Do you want to continue to Chapter 4 to see the HOA's first reaction to my evidence? The next morning, I walked into the HOA office with my formal letter and copies of all supporting evidence. The receptionist's polite smile couldn't hide her unease. I handed over the documents, and for the first time, I sensed a shift. Something about the atmosphere told me that the board was no longer in full control. Within hours, emails and phone calls began arriving. Board members requested clarifications, dates, and explanations, their tone noticeably defensive. The same people who had confidently sent threatening letters now seemed vulnerable and uncertain. It was clear my organized evidence had shaken them. Every missing signature, irregular fine, and procedural lapse now demanded an explanation. Neighbors reached out, sharing their own experiences with unjust fines. Their stories mirrored mine: phantom rule violations, missing approvals, and late fees for infractions that never existed. This confirmed what I had suspected: the problem was systemic, not isolated. With their accounts, the picture of mismanagement became even stronger. My personal battle had evolved into a community-wide challenge. The board's internal communications became frantic. Emails grew shorter and more cautious, meetings were scheduled at odd hours, and whispered discussions hinted at panic. They were trying to regain control, but the unified presence of informed homeowners made evasion impossible. Every attempt to intimidate or mislead was now countered by facts. During a tense board meeting, I presented my findings formally. Line by line, document by document, the board's previous threats and arbitrary fines were exposed. Homeowners asked pointed questions, reinforcing the evidence and creating an unassailable narrative. The room, once dominated by the board's authority, now resonated with accountability. By the end of the session, the board's demeanor had completely changed. Threats that once loomed over residents were now powerless. Homeowners saw the power of preparation and documentation firsthand. The $5,000 fine that had initiated this ordeal had transformed into a turning point, one that would hold the board accountable and inspire neighbors to stand. After the board meeting, I realized I held a unique advantage. The $5,000 fine, once a source of fear, had become a tool to hold the HOA accountable. I knew that with careful planning and strategic presentation, I could force them to correct not just my fines but the systemic errors affecting the entire neighborhood. I began compiling a comprehensive report, combining all irregular fines, missing approvals, and the critical board resolution requiring majority votes. Every piece of evidence was meticulously documented: letters, emails, meeting minutes, and timelines, so the board could no longer ignore the facts. This report was my shield and weapon. Next, I discreetly reached out to neighbors who had faced similar fines. Together, we formed a coalition, sharing documents and experiences. What started as a personal challenge quickly evolved into a community effort. The board could no longer dismiss this as an isolated complaint. Multiple homeowners were now standing with clear, documented proof. With the coalition prepared, I scheduled a follow-up meeting with the board. This time, I was ready to present the evidence strategically, leaving no room for evasion. The atmosphere was tense. The same people who had once threatened me now seemed unsettled. The shift in power was palpable. During the meeting, I walked the board through each violation, referencing missing approvals, contradictory rules, and the board resolution. Their attempts to interrupt or defend themselves failed under the weight of clear evidence. Homeowners supported my presentation, asking pointed questions that revealed further inconsistencies. It was a complete reversal. The intimidation tactics of the HOA had collapsed. By the end of the session, the board conceded. Fines issued without proper authority were retracted. Policies were revised to ensure compliance, and a neutral review committee was introduced to oversee future fines. The organization that had tried to intimidate residents was now compelled to implement transparency and fairness. The transformation was remarkable. What had begun as a personal fight had become a demonstration of accountability. The $5,000 fine, intended to punish me, had inadvertently exposed systemic flaws and empowered the entire neighborhood. Fear had been replaced by clarity, courage, and community action. I left the meeting realizing the power of preparation and persistence. Knowledge had turned the tables. The board's authority, once absolute, was now held in check by facts and community oversight. This victory was not just mine, it was a collective triumph for every homeowner affected by their mismanagement. After the follow-up meeting, the HOA board was visibly rattled. Their emails shifted from commanding to cautious, defensive messages. Phone calls became abrupt, carefully worded, revealing their growing unease. The same people who had once projected confidence and intimidation were now scrambling to regain control. The $5,000 fine that had terrified me had become their undoing. Within days, the board issued a formal notice stating they would review all fines issued over the past 3 years. While framed as a procedural review, it was clear they were attempting to cover mistakes. Behind closed doors, tension ran high. Whispered discussions, sudden meetings, and frantic phone calls hinted at panic. The power they once wielded was slipping. I continued communicating with neighbors, who provided additional records and stories. Each document, email, and anecdote strengthened our position. The board's mismanagement was now fully documented, and their previous intimidation attempts were completely transparent. The coalition's unity made it impossible for the board to dismiss or ignore the evidence. Determined to maintain leverage, I sent a follow-up letter highlighting additional irregularities, fines issued to homeowners whose board terms had expired, inconsistencies in meeting minutes, and violations of the board resolution requiring majority votes. The letter was firm and professional, leaving no room for evasion. Every document and fact now supported a powerful, undeniable case. The board attempted to regain control through partial settlements and minor concessions, hoping homeowners would accept small victories and remain silent. But the coalition stood firm. Our evidence and collective resolve meant that the board could no longer manipulate, intimidate, or threaten residents. During a particularly tense meeting, one board member admitted privately, "We didn't realize how serious the situation was." That admission was monumental. The acknowledgement confirmed what we already knew: the board had lost its authority, and the homeowners, armed with facts, were now in control. By the end of the week, it was clear the HOA's credibility had been shattered. The $5,000 fine that had initiated this battle had inadvertently exposed systemic mismanagement, creating a ripple effect throughout the community. Residents, once fearful, now had confidence that the rules applied fairly, and that accountability was enforceable. With the board visibly shaken, it was time to secure a lasting victory. The $5,000 fine had become more than a personal battle. It was now a symbol of systemic flaws and a catalyst for accountability. My goal was to ensure the HOA could no longer intimidate residents with arbitrary fines. I compiled a final, comprehensive report: all irregular fines, missing approvals, expired board terms, and the critical resolution requiring majority votes. Each document, letter, and timeline was meticulously organized. This report would be impossible to ignore. It was designed to leave no ambiguity, ensuring that the board's mismanagement could not continue. Next, I coordinated with neighbors. Our coalition had grown, and each homeowner contributed evidence and testimony. We prepared to present the report at a public meeting, demonstrating the breadth of the HOA's missteps. The unified front made clear: this was no longer a personal grievance, it was a community demand for justice. During the meeting, I presented the findings systematically. Line by line, document by document, the board's previous threats and arbitrary fines were exposed. Homeowners asked pointed questions, reinforcing the evidence and creating an unassailable narrative. The room, once dominated by the board's authority, now resonated with accountability. The board could no longer evade responsibility. Fines issued without proper approvals were formally retracted. Policies were rewritten to enforce transparency, and a neutral review committee was established to oversee future fines. Residents finally had safeguards against abuse. The culture of fear had been replaced with fairness and clarity. Some board members attempted minor defenses, but the weight of evidence was overwhelming. Others quietly resigned, recognizing the irreversible shift in power. The victory was not just about reversing fines, it was about restoring trust and authority based on law, not intimidation. Months later, the impact was clear. Homeowners were confident, attending meetings, reviewing fines, and participating in governance. The story of the $5,000 fine became a blueprint for standing up to authority, proving that one determined individual, armed with evidence and persistence, could hold even a powerful HOA accountable. The $5,000 fine, which once seemed catastrophic, had become a catalyst for systemic change. The experience reinforced a timeless lesson: knowledge is power, preparation is key, and community solidarity transforms fear into strength. Word of the HOA's missteps spread quickly. Homeowners who had silently endured unjust fines now felt empowered. Conversations shifted from frustration to action, with many expressing gratitude for uncovering the truth. What had begun as my personal fight had sparked a community-wide awakening. Neighbors shared stories of their own fines, phantom infractions, late fees for non-existent violations, and enforcement without proper approval. These accounts reinforced the systemic nature of the problem. The coalition of homeowners grew, each member committed to transparency and fairness. The board could no longer operate in secrecy, every action was now scrutinized. Social dynamics transformed almost overnight. Residents who had previously avoided confrontation now attended meetings with confidence. Equipped with knowledge and evidence, they demanded accountability. The coalition ensured that any future fines would be thoroughly reviewed and legally valid, preventing the board from intimidating homeowners again. Some board members tried to regain control, issuing vague notices or attempting to pressure new residents. But these tactics were transparent and easily challenged. The power dynamic had shifted permanently. Authority was now checked by community vigilance, not fear. Homeowners were united, informed, and empowered. Local media caught wind of the story after a resident posted about the $5,000 fine and the secret discovery online. Reporters visited, interviewed homeowners, and documented the board's failures. Coverage highlighted how one determined individual, armed with evidence and persistence, could hold authority accountable. The story resonated far beyond our neighborhood, inspiring other communities facing similar HOA challenges. The board, once confident and intimidating, now faced scrutiny from the public. Policies were revised, oversight committees implemented, and fines could only be issued with proper documentation. Homeowners regained trust, knowing that fairness and transparency were no longer optional, they were mandatory. Reflecting on the ripple effect, I realized the impact extended beyond my own victory. One secret carefully uncovered and strategically presented had transformed the entire neighborhood's relationship with authority. Residents were no longer fearful, they were vigilant, confident, and united. The experience proved that preparation, knowledge, and community action could overturn even entrenched power. The $5,000 fine that had initially seemed catastrophic became a catalyst for long-lasting change and empowerment. Fear was replaced by courage, intimidation by accountability, and uncertainty by unity. The final chapter of this ordeal was more than just reversing fines, it was about transforming the HOA and the community. With the $5,000 fine retracted, policies rewritten, and a neutral oversight committee established, the board no longer held unchecked power. Residents now had confidence and safeguards, ensuring rules would be enforced fairly. Reflecting on the journey, I remembered the shock of receiving the $5,000 fine. Fear initially consumed me, but instead of surrendering, I investigated, documented, and challenged the board systematically. Each step requesting records, uncovering missing approvals, and discovering the pivotal board resolution formed the foundation for victory. Careful planning and persistence had turned a personal threat into a powerful lesson in accountability. Neighbors approached me, expressing gratitude and relief. Many admitted they had felt powerless under the board's authority, but my actions inspired them to stand up for their rights. The coalition we formed remained active, monitoring compliance and ensuring the new policies were properly enforced. What had begun as a personal struggle had evolved into a community-wide movement for justice and transparency. The board, once confident and aggressive, had no choice but to acknowledge its mistakes publicly. Some members resigned, while others adapted to the new, transparent rules. Authority was no longer enforced through intimidation, it was based on fairness and legal compliance. The shift was permanent, and the community had reclaimed its voice. Personally, the ordeal taught invaluable lessons. Fear often comes from the unknown, but knowledge and preparation are powerful tools. One carefully discovered secret: the board resolution had the power to destroy the authority of an entire board when leveraged correctly. Courage, combined with strategy, proved stronger than any threat. Even months later, I received messages from homeowners in other neighborhoods asking how I achieved this. The story became a blueprint for challenging unfair authority, proving that no individual or organization is untouchable when faced with documentation, preparation, and persistence. The $5,000 fine, which once seemed catastrophic, became a catalyst for systemic change. The experience reinforced a timeless lesson: knowledge is power, preparation is key, and community solidarity transforms fear into strength. This victory was not just about money, it was about justice, empowerment, and proving that even one determined person can spark change. Fear had been replaced by confidence, intimidation by accountability, and uncertainty by clarity.